Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you found today informative and useful, and I hope you and your teammates and your family are safe and healthy as we get to the end of 2021. My work at Commercial Radio Australia is all about the non-traditional delivery of radio and audio services for the industry. It's streaming, it's apps, it's smart speakers, it's the industry's relationship with big tech like Google and Facebook and Amazon, podcasts, audio on demand, podcast measurement and monetization. So in this presentation for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to talk about one of those things that's really captured the attention of our members this year. That's podcasting, and talk about some of the new tech that's coming up and what you can do with it in 2021. Before looking at what's coming up, though, I think it's worth looking at how podcasting works now, and it's via the RSS feed. This slide is my most technical slide. It's as techie as I'll get. How podcasting works is as follows, and I'm borrowing this slide from Buzzsprout in the US. A podcaster, or in this instance, a radio broadcaster, makes a podcast. They'll then use a podcast hosting platform like an Omni to upload that audio to the cloud and create an RSS feed. That RSS feed is like a feed, a listing that is picked up by apps and directories like Apple Podcasts, like Spotify, like Overcast, which in turn then make it available to listeners. There's a train of thought, though, that's started to appear this year that says maybe you don't need your podcasts available everywhere. Maybe you don't need the RSS feed, and maybe you don't need every app and directory to pick up your podcast to make it available to listeners, and maybe it should be exclusive. That idea is called windowing, and it's kind of like movies at the cinema, where a movie will appear first in theaters and then roll out to DVDs and movie streaming services after that. But in this instance, the podcast doesn't leave its exclusive environment. It only stays there. It's already started to happen for 2020, and the big example being Michelle Obama. She signed an exclusive deal with Spotify to create and make podcasts that only sit on the Spotify platform. So it's a win-win for both of them. Michelle Obama gets a nice payday from Spotify, and Spotify have exclusive content that they can market. So they did that. They launched a podcast series, and it was touted as being only available and exclusive on Spotify. Fast forward a few months, and their tune changed. Spotify announced that it was being made available on all platforms. The big challenge there is that it wasn't enough of a driver to get people to the Spotify platform to reach mass audience, to have as many people as possible to listen to that podcast. So the strategy was changed to make it available elsewhere. So here's my thinking here, is that if Michelle Obama and Spotify can't make windowing work, then what should a radio broadcaster do for 2021? I think we're already starting to see some things happen that show what will be happening. Here's some examples from Australia. Now, this is the Triple M app. Triple M is a rock network in Australia. And if you go back a couple of years, the Triple M app would have only had live radio on it. That's it. But what's happened since then is the appearance of some new buttons and some new content. So there's shows and news. Now, with shows, there's the option to listen to radio content, radio shows that are packaged for later listening, and original content, and the opportunity to listen to news. Now, this is kind of like a windowing, isn't it? Because the news services appeared first on the radio and then are available for later listening within the app. So it feels like the app becomes a much more special offering, and Triple M becomes a much more bigger offering online. Same thing that's happening for the Nova network, a top 40 network in Australia, in which the experience is built around live radio, but there are new buttons there so that when you're listening to audio, it can be also about listening to the news and listening to podcasts, radio shows that are packaged for later listening, and a bunch of original podcasts that build on the strength of the Nova network. So people are there because of Nova, but this is an opportunity to get them to sample new content whilst in that environment of live radio. So thinking about windowing and thinking about apps being the primary place for podcast listening, what can and should a radio broadcaster be doing in 2021? I think my first tip, keep your content available to everyone across all platforms. Radio's game and radio success is about being in as many places as possible, reaching as many people as possible. Now, I know that it's cool to have exclusive environments and it's cool to only be available in certain places, and that's quite the buzz in the podcast world, but it doesn't play to the strength of radio. So I think smart broadcasters will keep their content available everywhere. And that plays to your live radio strengths. So create compelling content that builds and extends on your live radio offering. It makes it easier to explain on air. It makes it easier to include in your app. And it makes it easier to grow a new audience and grow new engagement with your podcasts. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do windowing, but almost think about reversing your windowing. So yes to windowed releases, but maybe what you do is that in certain other places, you only release certain episodes or you release them a little bit later. So it might be that your station app and website is the place to listen to podcasts first, and then a couple of weeks later, they'll appear everywhere else like Apple Podcasts and the like. Or it could be that a place like Apple Podcasts, you'll get the best of, the highlights that encourage people to then listen on your main app. And the last one I'll bring up with all this talk of windowing and platforms and whatever is to be careful where else your podcasts appear, especially on services that can take your audience away from your live radio. Now, by this, I mean music streaming services, and particularly for music radio stations. You don't want to make podcasts as a music station. Make them available on music streaming services so that your listeners can listen to your content on a music streaming service, then press play on songs on that platform afterwards, meaning that their time spent with your radio station is a lot less than it used to be. They may not need to listen to your radio station anymore. So I would recommend absolute caution when it comes to having your podcasts on music streaming services. I hope that was useful. I hope you found those 4 tips useful. Please drop me a line anytime if you have any questions, if you want to talk about podcasting or our work with streaming and smart speakers and our work with Google and Amazon and radio app. You can contact me on this email address. All the best for the rest of the year and 2021.